They actually finished the story. Filmation almost made Flash Gordon as live-action television. $2 million per episode killed that version before a single frame was shot. And what replaced it turned out to be something better than the original ambition. That's the buried lead of this entire show. It had a real ending. In this video, you'll find out why the animated series existed at all, what Ming's daughter did that nobody saw coming, and why the live-action version that almost happened would have changed everything about what you remember. The original 1979 run of The New Adventures of Flash Gordon didn't leave Ming the Merciless twirling his mustache for another season. Flash, Dale Arden, and Dr. Zarkov defeated him. His empire fell. They climbed back into the rocket ship and went home to Earth. Done. Resolved. Finished. Which was genuinely rare territory for a genre that kept villains alive specifically to avoid cancellation. A cartoon from 1979 stuck the landing better than most modern streaming shows. And somehow, that wasn't even the end of the story. If buried animation history is your thing, subscribing means you get the next deep dive the day it drops, not 6 months later when the algorithm decides you exist.
Number 9. The brains running the whole operation. Flash Gordon got the glory. Dr. Hans Zarkov kept everybody alive. Zarkov doesn't get nearly the credit he deserves in nostalgic conversations about this series. Flash was the athletic, charismatic hero, throwing punches and charming alien royalty. But without Zarkov, none of them make it to Mongo in the first place. The brilliant, gloriously eccentric scientist built the rocket ship that launched the entire adventure.
Every time Ming's technology posed a threat that couldn't be punched or outrun, Zarkov was reverse engineering it, finding the weak point, devising the solution. He was the analytical counterweight to Flash's instinctive heroism, the kind of partnership that made the team feel genuinely complete rather than artificially balanced.
In a decade full of muscle-first heroes, Zarkov quietly made the case that being the smartest person in the rocket ship was just as heroic as being the strongest. He was also, it should be noted, the reason they were on Mongo at all, having essentially kidnapped Flash and Dale to get them on board in the first place. Heroism and questionable judgment, apparently, are not mutually exclusive.
The most dangerous game they'll ever hunt. Come on.
Number 8. Mongo was bigger than you remember. You remember the Hawkmen. Mongo had entire civilizations you probably forgot existed. One of the most ambitious choices in the 1979 series was treating Mongo as a fully realized, genuinely complex world. Ming ruled over not one homogeneous alien population, but a remarkable collection of distinct races, kingdoms, and cultures, each with their own geography, traditions, and reasons to either support or resist his tyranny. Flash's mission wasn't just to fight Ming, it was to unite an entire fractured planet behind a common cause, which is a considerably harder problem than throwing a punch. Beyond the iconic Hawkmen soaring through Mongo's skies, the series introduced the arboreal treemen of Arborea, the fierce warrior lion men, and the cold-dwelling people of Phrygia. Each kingdom brought different skills, different stakes, different reasons to trust a human stranger from Earth who showed up claiming he could help. Mongo wasn't a backdrop. It was practically a character itself.
Flash, I have a plan. Voltan doesn't know it.
Number 7. The villain who set the text. Before Darth Vader completed his cultural takeover, Ming the Merciless was doing the heavy lifting. Ming is one of those villains so complete in his conception that he simply is what a science fiction tyrant looks like. Emperor of Mongo, ruler of a vast technological empire, possessed of a calm, contemptuous cruelty that made every scene he occupied feel genuinely dangerous. The 1979 series understood this character completely and deployed him accordingly. What made Ming work wasn't just his power, but his absolute certainty that he deserved it. He didn't rant or lose his composure. He issued commands and watched lesser beings scramble. His technological arsenal made him nearly untouchable, and his political control over Mongo's kingdoms made direct confrontation suicidal. Every plan Flash devised had to account for Ming's resources, his intelligence, and his complete willingness to destroy anything that inconvenienced him. You've seen his shadow in 100 subsequent stories. The robed ruler on a throne world. The empire built on fear. The cold intelligence paired with absolute authority. This version reminded a whole generation why he earned that status in the first place. Some archetypes exist because one character defined them so completely that everything after is just a variation.
Now's our chance to escape.
Number 6. What were they even supposed to call this thing? A legendary show. A surprisingly confusing nameplate situation. The original first season aired officially under the name The New Adventures of Flash Gordon. Straightforward enough. When the show returned in 1982, the title was shortened to simply Flash Gordon, dropping the New Adventures designation as though it had never existed. And then television movie compiled the first 16 episodes and aired before the series officially premiered, adding another layer of scheduling confusion for anyone trying to follow along. The result was a beloved property with multiple official identities across a fairly short broadcast lifespan, which, for a marketing department, would be a slow-motion disaster. Ask those viewers what they called the show, and you get one answer: the Flash Gordon cartoon. The 1979 one, the real one. Fans' collective memory bulldozed the title committee's decisions entirely, which is honestly the most fitting tribute a nostalgic audience can deliver. You can confuse the branding all you want. You cannot confuse the memory of something that genuinely mattered. Number 5. The movie that changed everything before it even existed. A Hollywood producer's ambition quietly redirected an entire animated series. When Dino De Laurentiis acquired the film rights to Flash Gordon and began developing what became the 1980 theatrical film, the landscape for any parallel live-action TV version shifted dramatically. Suddenly, two completely different Flash Gordon adaptations were being developed simultaneously: Filmation's animated series and De Laurentiis' splashy, Queen-soundtracked theatrical feature. Two tonal approaches to the same source material, aimed at overlapping audiences, arriving in the same cultural window. The animated series got there first, which meant an entire generation had Filmation's version of these characters locked into their imagination before the movie ever arrived. First impressions are powerful and surprisingly durable. The animated show planted the flag on how Flash, Dale, and Ming felt, and for millions of kids, that version remained the definitive one, regardless of what the cinema offered. Dino De Laurentiis had the budget, the stars, and the Queen soundtrack. Filmation had the head start. Head starts matter more than you'd think.
I know who she is, but I also know I love her.
Number 4. They actually respected the source material. In an era when adaptations routinely mangled their origins, this one did something remarkable. Alex Raymond created the Flash Gordon comic strips in 1934. What he built over the following decades was a lush, detailed universe, rich alien societies, epic scope, characters with genuine complexity, and a visual style that influenced science fiction illustration and film production design for decades after. Adapting that faithfully to Saturday morning animation in 1979 was a significant creative commitment. Filmation actually honored it, which was far from guaranteed. The series drew directly from Raymond's original character designs and recreated the intricate alien societies he'd constructed with genuine care. Longtime fans of the comic strips found their expectations met in ways that adaptation audiences almost never experience. That kind of fidelity is rarer than it should be, then and now. Most adaptations strip the source down to its most marketable surface. This one went the other direction, treating Alex Raymond's world as something worth preserving rather than something worth exploiting. Respect for the source. What a concept. Number 3. Flash Gordon's real superpower had nothing to do with technology. Strip away the rocket ship and the ray guns, and what you find is a hero whose actual advantage was something much harder to manufacture. Flash's defining quality was never firepower. It was adaptability. The almost unreasonable human capacity to walk into a completely alien situation and find a way not just to survive, but to lead. The 1979 series leaned into this completely. Flash mastered alien technologies through observation and improvisation. He earned the trust of races with entirely different cultures and no particular reason to believe in an earthling stranger who showed up claiming he could help.
It made him relatable in a way that purely superpowered heroes often aren't. You couldn't imagine being Superman. You could imagine being Flash Gordon if you were just a little faster, a little braver, and significantly better at everything. The aspiration felt reachable. The character has endured across nearly a century of storytelling for exactly this reason. Courage plus improvisation ages better than any superpower ever invented. Ming had the technology, the army, and the empire. Flash had the one thing none of that can manufacture: the ability to make people believe that winning was still possible. That's not a superpower. That's something rarer.
At the moment, he enjoys the tender mercy of Voltan.
Number 2. Princess Aura was the most interesting character in the room. She started as an obstacle. She became the show's most complex creation. Ming never saw it coming. Ming the Merciless's daughter began the series as a formidable antagonist in her own right, captivating, dangerous, and positioned as both a rival to Dale Arden and an extension of her father's power. She was someone you watched carefully because you genuinely weren't sure what she'd do next. That uncertainty was the show doing something sophisticated with a character who could have been purely decorative and nobody would have complained. Then her arc executed one of the most satisfying turns in the entire series. Her growing affection for Flash didn't soften her or reduce her to a supporting role. It radicalized her against her own father's regime. Aura's betrayal of Ming carried genuine dramatic weight precisely because you'd watched her initial loyalty and understood what crossing that line actually cost her. She didn't just switch sides. She chose a set of values over a blood relationship, which is a genuinely adult story beat embedded in a Saturday morning cartoon. By the time the first season concluded, Aura had evolved from dangerous rival to brave, independent ally, one whose judgment and courage were earned rather than assigned by the plot. She remains the character most likely to surprise you if you revisit the series today. Ming created a weapon. She became something he never anticipated, and in doing so, she outgrew him entirely. That arc belongs in any honest conversation about what this show actually achieved.
This palace of Ming's is ringed with secret passages. It's like a gothic movie set.
Number 1. The live-action show that almost buried the animated classic entirely. The version of Flash Gordon you know almost never existed, and the reason why is wilder than you'd expect. Filmation's original vision for Flash Gordon was a live-action television series, not a cartoon. The production company envisioned sets, costumes, practical effects, and actors. The ambition was genuine. The price tag was devastating. Estimated costs ran approximately $2 million per episode, a figure that made the entire project economically impossible for late 1970s television budgets and ended the conversation before a single frame was shot. The solution was to retool the entire concept as animation, which creatively turned out to be the luckier path. Animation allowed Filmation to fully realize Mongo's diverse kingdoms and Ming's imperial grandeur in ways a live-action television budget could never have achieved. What financial constraint forced was actually a better artistic fit for the story being told. The limitation became the advantage, and then the scheduling made everything stranger still. The first 16 episodes were compiled into a television movie that aired before the series officially premiered, meaning audiences encountered the show in a scrambled sequence before the regular broadcast order even began. A $2 million per episode obstacle. A Dino De Laurentiis film arriving in the same cultural moment. A title that changed between seasons. A TV movie that preceded its own series. By any reasonable measure, this show had every reason to get lost. Instead, it landed in the memory of an entire generation with the force of a rocket hitting Mongo's atmosphere. Sometimes the obstacles make the thing better. Sometimes the buried classic turns out to be exactly the right version of itself, the one that could only have existed because everything else got in the way first. The live-action show that never happened gave us something that couldn't have been made any other way.
Bonus fact, they went back on purpose. The second time Flash Gordon went to Mongo, nobody made him go. When the series returned in 1982 under the simplified title Flash Gordon, something fundamental had shifted in the premise. Flash, Dale, and Zarkov had already defeated Ming, survived Mongo, and made it home to Earth, a genuine, conclusive victory. The kind most Saturday morning cartoons never bothered delivering. They had their lives back, the adventure was over, and then they chose to return. That single storytelling decision transforms the entire dynamic of the second season. The first season's heroes were reluctant adventurers thrust into an impossible situation by circumstance and Zarkov's arguably questionable decision-making. The second season's heroes were people who looked at their comfortable lives on Earth and decided that Mongo still needed them, that what they'd built there was worth protecting even when nobody was forcing them to care. That shift, from compelled to voluntary, says something meaningful about who these characters had become through everything they'd survived together. It's the difference between a story about survival and a story about identity. By 1982, Flash Gordon's identity was no longer primarily Guy from Earth. It was something more complicated and more interesting. Someone for whom Mongo had become a second home worth fighting for a second time. That's a genuine character arc, the kind that takes an entire season to earn. Not bad for a cartoon that almost became a live-action series nobody could afford. Flash Gordon, 1979, nearly didn't exist as animation. It launched with a movie before its series began, changed its name between seasons, competed with a theatrical film in its own cultural moment, and somehow delivered a more faithful adaptation of Alex Raymond's original vision than anyone had a right to expect from Saturday morning television. It gave us Ming the Merciless as the template for science fiction tyranny. It gave us Princess Aura as one of animation's most genuinely complex characters. It built an entire alien world, populated with distinct civilizations worth remembering. And it trusted a generation of kids with a story that actually ended, then proved there was still more worth telling. So here's the question for the comments. Which fact rewired something in your memory? The live-action origin that financial reality killed before it started? Aura's betrayal of her own father? Or the fact that they voluntarily went back to Mongo when nobody was making them? Drop it below. On Mongo, Flash's biggest weapon was never the ray gun. It was the refusal to accept that any situation was truly hopeless. Saving the universe, it turns out, is a full-time gig. Flash Gordon just made it look like a Saturday morning.